On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we look at the top shipbuilders around the world. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Happy National Maritime Day. That's right, today is May 22nd, 2023. This is the 90th anniversary of the first declaration by Franklin Delano Roosevelt of National Maritime Day here in the United States. It commemorates the sailing of the SS Savannah, the very first steam-powered ship to cross the Atlantic in 1819. So obviously here in the United States, this is a national holiday. Schools are closed, federal holiday, state holiday. There are massive parades for all the merchant mariners. And I just want to give a toast to... What's that? Really? No parades? No? Okay. Still a day off. Oh, no day off. Got to go into work today. So what do we get for National Maritime Day? Yeah, we get a proclamation by the president. That's it. Oh, lemonade. Oh, yep, there is nothing for National Maritime Day in the United States except a proclamation. And I thought there was nothing fitter to do today than to look at where the United States sits in terms of the world in national shipbuilding. Now, we're going to be looking at commercial shipbuilding, not military shipbuilding, naval. So we're going to spend our time looking at that aspect. This data comes from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, which works in conjunction with Clarkson's research. So we're going to look at the top 15 nations across the planet that build the world ships based on tonnage. If you're new to the program, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. So not just going to be using data from UNCTAD, but I'm going to be using their site a little bit, which allows us to look at this. And we're going to be looking at specifically shipbuilding based on gross tons. So our number 15 country is going to be the Republic of India. Now, India is the second largest country in the world in terms of population, and the third biggest economy in terms of purchasing power. And one of the things we're seeing is India growing in size. Now, they build a whopping 0.12% of the world's ships. To put 0.12% into context, that equates to 72,000 gross tons of shipping that were built in the nation of India. All told, about 60.8 million gross tons of ships were built in 2021. And I'll have links to all this data so that you can pull it up and take a look at it yourself. All right, number 15, India. Number 14 is the nation of the Netherlands at 0.19%. Now, not surprising. I mean, you can't go 50 feet in the Netherlands without falling into a canal or water. So shipbuilding is kind of really ingrained in them. They have also designed very specialized vessels. In particularly, they're huge into the yacht construction business, but also into dredges. And that's one of the areas where we've seen the Netherlands really prosper. So number 13 is the Republic of Turkey, just coming in just above the Netherlands at 0.22%. And this country in particularly has a specialization in building small tonnage chemical tankers. And so we definitely see Turkey expanding. They're also developing a naval force that's quite impressive, even though they're buying a lot of it. The Turkish Navy and their commercial fleet is really important. We're really seeing them play a big role right now in the grain issue coming out of the Black Sea. At number 12 on our list, it is Russia. Russia comes in at 0.22%. Now, Russia has been a shipbuilding powerhouse in the past. However, commercially, they do not build as much. They get many of their vessels from overseas, largely from Korea. As a matter of fact, during the invasion of Ukraine, there was an issue about whether or not Korea was going to sell Russia several vessels that were earmarked for them, including several large liquefied natural gas carriers. And the Russians have been suffering a lot in their shipbuilding sector when Ukraine broke away back in the 1990s. This has really hurt them, especially in the area of engine propulsion and machinery. All right, let's go ahead and jump to our next one. At number 11 on our list is the Kingdom of Norway. Again, another nation with a long history of seafaring. And Norway comes in at 0.24%, with most of its shipbuilding facilities obviously located on the West Coast, usually building some very highly specialized vessels, particularly some smaller cruise ships and fishing vessels is really where Norway sees themselves. Coming in number 10 on our list, I all of a sudden feel like Casey Kasem doing the countdown. The French Republic. France, 0.29%. Largely, this is being done through cruise ship construction on their West Coast yards. Chantier de l'Atlantique is really one of the biggest shipbuilders, and France is Europe's second largest shipbuilder after Germany. And so the French have really found the market here. Cruise ships is one of them, smaller vessels also in that area. Number 9 is China. No, not mainland China, the other China, the China that China doesn't like to talk about. This is Taiwan. Taiwan comes in at number 9, building 0.30% of the world's ships. Again, most of this is concentrated around the very southern end of the island, around Kaohsiung, with the CSBC Corporation. Taiwan building smaller vessels. Ironically, most of Taiwan's vessels are built either in Korea, Japan, or now, believe it or not, communist mainland China. Evergreen in particularly has been getting a lot of their vessels built in China for China, which is really, really confusing. All right, let's go ahead and jump to number 8. We go into the Baltic, in this case, the Republic of Finland, where Finland becomes one of the largest constructors in the world, 0.36% of the world. Meyer Turku and Roma Marine Constructions. You see two types of vessels being built largely in Finland. One is cruise ships, believe it or not, and the second is icebreakers. Finland is really the world lead on the construction of icebreakers. Russia also is the other one, but Finland in particularly has been really good at developing this niche market, and they have been developing it in large numbers. All right, let's go ahead and jump to our next. So number 7 on the list is the Socialist Republic of Vietnam at 0.61%. Now, this number is really interesting to me because one of the countries I would argue to watch in the years to come is going to be Vietnam and ship construction. I think Vietnam has the potential, along with India, to be a major player in ship construction, largely because of their workforce and the availability of raw materials and other finished products to be used. We're seeing it right now. There's more than 24 shipyards in Vietnam. The question is, will they invest in shipbuilding as a strategy for that nation? It'll be a big one to be watching in the years to come. Number 6 on our list, the Federal Republic of Germany. And Germany comes in at 0.63%. And Germany does really two types of vessels. One, very small coastal vessels that operate in and around Germany, the North Sea, the Baltic, that region. Also on their rivers, a lot of river traffic in and around Germany. But the other element that they do is cruise ship construction. However, there was a major fault in a cruise ship line. This is the cruise line Genting that went bankrupt, and their shipyard in Germany was also declared bankruptcy. There's a lot of issues associated with that. Germany has bought that shipyard, the nation has, and there's a big question about what happens with that shipyard. Supposedly it's going to transition over to building submarines, but that is a much smaller construction than a large ocean-going cruise ship. All right, that is number 15 to 6, and now we're going to jump into the top 5. Coming in number 5, the Italian Republic. Paisans, Goombas, my brethren, are number 5 on the list with 0.82%. Italy is really interesting in that it has some of the oldest shipyards in the world. It has a massive ship repair facility, and plus it is constructing vessels, does a lot of vessels for Mediterranean trade, coastal vessels. They do ferries, and when I say ferries, don't think American ferries, think about European ferries. These are ferries that carry cars and vehicles. They also build cruise ships. Fincantieri, for example, is the largest shipbuilder in Italy. One of the things to note, however, is that Italy has worked, Fincantieri specifically, with China to help China develop a cruise ship construction. The question is that detrimental to Fincantieri in the long run? I tend not to think it's deadly to Fincantieri. I think it's a big problem for France, Germany, and Finland that are also building cruise ships, but we will see. All right, let's jump to our next one. Number 4 on the list is the Republic of Philippines. This is at 1.06%. This is the first nation we get to where we jump over a single digit. So the Philippines builds 1.06% of the world's ships, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. First off, Philippines is a nation of 1,000 islands. Makes perfect sense for this. They've invested in building local vessels, coastal vessels to get around the islands, but also for trade in and around Southeast Asia. Philippines is also, remember, the nation that produces the world's most mariners who sail vessels. So shipping in the Philippines goes hand in hand. And big question here, whether or not the Philippines continues to expand and grow in this region or not. They have a lot of competition that's out there in this region, so a little bit difficult for them to really grow here beyond where they're at. So now we get in the top three, and you can see right here by the graph that the impact the top three nations have in this graph. We go to the nation of Japan. Japan builds 17.6% of the world's nations. Go back to the Philippines at 1.06%, and now you are at 17.6% with Japan, and the Japanese have been doing this for a long time. One of the things we saw happen post-World War II is the rebuilding of the Japanese shipyards. Thanks to the Marshall Plan, you saw investment into Japanese shipyards. The closing of the Suez Canal in 1956 led to the construction of the very first quote-unquote supertankers, what will eventually become very large crude carriers and ultra-large crude carriers built in the dry docks that were used to build the Yamato and the Musashi. Japan has been a leading nation in terms of shipbuilding. Not surprising when you think about the fact that Japan is an island nation. You know, this is something that Japan realized that they could invest in and develop. And so Japan has become a leading shipbuilder. However, 17.6% is actually a decrease from where Japan has been in the past. They are being whittled down by those two nations that hold the top two. Oh, please be the United States. Please be the United States. Coming in at number two, the Republic of Korea. This is South Korea, not the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. They build very small boats and ballistic missiles. The Republic of Korea comes in at 32.4%. This is a country that has Samsung, Daewoo, Hyundai. These are big shipbuilding firms. Matter of fact, one of the areas that Korea has absolutely dominated in is in the construction of liquefied natural gas carriers. They build something like 90% of the world's LNGs have been built in Korea, although they're getting competition now from the nation that is in number one. This building block of Korea has been amazing to watch. In the 70s and 80s, you saw Korea really start challenging European and American shipyards. And because of decisions made in the United States, for example, in the 1980s going into the 1990s, to curtail subsidies for ship construction in the United States, commercial shipbuilding went overseas. You saw that with U.S. lines building their big econo ships over in Korea. You saw it with the construction of the Sealift SL-7s. Over in Europe, you saw this happen, and one of the things we saw was the decline of U.S. shipbuilding because the decision was made not to subsidize international ship construction or international trade vessels any further, and Korea has emerged now at 32.4%. However, I will note that Korea is facing a big challenger in number one. There is a three-way shipbuilding war going on in the Far East. You've seen Japan, you've seen Korea, and that takes us to nation number one, which is not going to be the United States. I can tell you that right now. Our number one hit for 2022 in terms of shipbuilding in the world is going to be China. That's right, China. The People's Republic of China emerges as the number one shipbuilder at 44.2%. These numbers are as of 2021. This is a nation that has an amazing ability to build ships. To give you the idea here, the Chinese State Shipbuilding Corporation, which is the most ironic title in the world. How can you be a state shipbuilding corporation? I mean, again, only China can come up with this. But CSSC builds 20% by themselves of the world's ships. And China builds 44.2%. And so what you see here is that basically 94% of the world's shipbuilding is concentrated in three countries: Japan, Korea, and China. You will notice that several countries did not make this list. That's because those countries barely register on it. So, for example, the United States of America at 0.05%. That's right, 0.05%. Go back over here to India. India was coming in at basically 0.12%. The United States at 0.05%. The United Kingdom, 0.03%. Australia, New Zealand is less than 0.01%. So most of the world's shipbuilding is really concentrated in those three countries. And actually, if you expand out, over 95% of shipbuilding is all concentrated right here in East Asia. If you throw Vietnam, Taiwan in there, you're talking about 95%, 19 out of 20 ships are being built, or tons are being built in East Asia today. And again, there's a lot of reasons for why this happens. I posted a tweet about this. This is the reason for this video, as a matter of fact. Here's a tweet I posted yesterday that had this information in it. 473,000 views so far. I think it was one of my best tweets I ever did. But one of the things I want to do is contextualize this. Why does this exist? Why does this situation happen? And, you know, some of my buddies over at the Cato Institute, Colin Gebrow and probably Scott Linscomb. I don't know if Scott does it or not, because Scott has decided to basically block me. It seems that the Cato Institute believes in free trade, just not free speech. But anyway, I digress. But the reason for the tweet was really to put out there the information about where shipbuilding stands. And, you know, some people jump on this and they sit there and say, well, it's because of the Jones Act, Sal, because you have to be U.S. built and in the coastal trade. However, I would remind you that Great Britain doesn't have a Jones Act, and they're at 0.03%. New Zealand doesn't have one. Australia doesn't have one. A lot of those nations that are on the bottom of that list don't have one. And so there are other issues at play here. You cannot look at one single issue and sit there and say, this is the reason for the decline of U.S. shipbuilding. There is a host of issues. Understand, back in the 70s and 80s, when the decision was made to deregulate shipping in the United States, to basically pull off federal regulation, to get rid of subsidies and differentials, to incentivize ship construction and shipbuilding in the United States, that led to commercial ships heading overseas. The U.S. Department of Defense, particularly the Navy, was all for that, because now they can shift their Navy shipbuilding out of public Navy yards, close them down into private Navy yards, which become de facto public yards because the only business they have is Navy shipyards. But now they find themselves in a situation where there's not enough shipbuilding, Navy shipbuilding, to keep those commercial yards afloat. And now they're waking to the realization that, gee, perhaps having commercial shipbuilding is not a bad thing. If you look at nations that have big navies around the world, China, Korea, Japan, they have found that you need to have both commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding to be balanced. They have found that balance. Look at nations that are having difficulties with this. Look at Great Britain. Look at even France and Italy. Italy's, I would argue, creating a very balanced navy. If you look at the Italian Navy, it's a beautiful navy. They build some beautiful ships. They don't have a lot of issues that we have. Why? Because they have a good commercial shipbuilding base. Same thing with France. They have a shipbuilding commercial base. And I would argue that this chart and these numbers are indicative of what's happening in commercial trade now. There are many factors that have led to this. I did an entire video, which I'll have a link for at the very end of the video here, that talks about the decline of the U.S. Merchant Marine. And when you look at that video and you realize that there are many factors at play here, not just the Jones Act. On this National Maritime Day in the United States, I want to take a moment and just say my hat's off to everybody who is sailing right now in the U.S. Merchant Marine. That includes deep draft vessels out there, coastal vessels operating along the U.S. coast, hauling oil, hauling fuel, up and down the Great Lakes, up and down the rivers of the United States, moving ferries around the water, to commercial fishing out there. There is a slew of this. Understand, talking about reforming U.S. law is really important. We have to reform it. It needs to be reformed. The Jones Act needs to be reformed. But we need to remember that the Jones Act was a national maritime strategy that was created in 1920 to meet a specific issue. We need that again. We need a Merchant Marine Act of 2023, 2024, 2025, whatever it's going to be, so that we have a merchant marine policy, so that we are not finding ourselves in a situation we found ourselves in prior to the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, where all of a sudden all our goods piled up on the docks because foreign shipping disappeared. And we had to count on our commercial shipping, our coastal shipping, to haul that, and our shipbuilding base, which doesn't exist in the numbers they once did. So on this National Maritime Day, I want to thank you for watching. Hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, it's simple. You hit that super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a patron of the channel. You can do it monthly or yearly. Until our next video, and more importantly, till our next National Maritime Day, where we will get the day off, and there'll be parades and banners for the U.S. Merchant Marine. This is Sal, signing off.